Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, frankly, Scarlett, doesn't give a damn.
Tim Longo. I really don't.
Well, I actually spelled that D-A-M.
Okay.
Because you didn't get to the end of this game.
No.
Which takes place at a dam.
Oh, I drove across a dam at some point. Is that the same one?
That's where the game ends.
Okay.
So you didn't get there, which is, I guess, not a first that you didn't finish the game that we're playing. But and there was one I didn't finish either. Oh, neither one of us finished XCOM.
Yeah, I think just XCOM. Was there another that I didn't finish? I think XCOM.
Well, I had to help you with Final Fantasy IX.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, 9.
That's kind of a technicality, maybe.
No,
I
think
there
that's
was
fair.
one other.
I think that's fair.
Final
Fantasy
talking
9.
about it. Yeah,
Definitely.
we were talking about it on the stream last night that there was maybe something else that you hadn't finished, and I wasn't clear on whether you had or not at the time. But
the audience will have to remind us because I can't remember. Final Fantasy, I think officially we can say I didn't really finish it. I mean, this one, for all sorts of different reasons. I feel like when it comes to amount of time that I put into playing the games for the podcast, it's been about around the same as any other game, you know. I think as you were jokingly saying before, in the pre-show, it sort of got to a point where it demoralized me to a point where I just was like, yeah, I could keep pounding my head against this. Multiple missions actually that I kind of was spinning plates on, and and usually it just comes down to the timed missions and not knowing the city well enough, and having some bad luck, systemic sort of simulation stuff happen where it's sort of controller throwing wall missions, and we this is the case for many of the games we've played probably there, but because a lot of them are pretty difficult for modern day standards. But I would have put this game down a long time ago, to be honest. Even if I'd been playing it for fun, but I'm 4 missions I think from the end, which is unfortunate because it's pretty close.
You had to do the coffee carts. So actually only 3. Everything else is optional.
Coffee cart. There's 2 more that she has you do Asuka, and then the finale.
Okay, I thought it was only one between the carts. I could be wrong about that. I don't exactly remember. You have to shoot down the plane.
Yeah, there might be. It may be just the thing I was looking at was listing them as missions, but maybe it's like a not a full mission or something. Sometimes they have like a quick.
Like the movie or something is. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm closer than I thought, but yeah, it's a combination of time running out and patience running out. So I'm sorry, audience. Another one I'm not going to finish. And to be honest, I don't give a damn. I don't want to finish it. I really, other than for the sake of the podcast. But
and we've talked about it before, but the game is sort of actively, I was going to say more indifferent to you, to the fact that you're trying to do things right. That the game is just its systems, and the fact that you have some timed mission to do it's just indifferent to that. And I think that I thought about that a lot in terms of whether that's just a change in my taste in the last 20 years. Because I feel like this game I might have had more patience for at the time. Because certainly having replayed like Deus Ex this year, which is a game that I remember restarting levels a number of times because I was trying to do a non-lethal playthrough or whatever. I mean, even playing it for the cast, there was a lot of times where I had to reload a save, and there was a lot of saves coming for me playing that game. And here, I think I think actually the taste is a little similar, at least from that you're going to fail a lot if you have, here you're going to fail a lot, both because of time constraints, but also because the systems are just actively getting in your way. Though I will say one of the things that happened to me, especially this past time, is the past couple of sessions playing it, is that I just kind of rolled with it a lot more. I felt I had a lot more fun with just the driving around, even trying to get to places really quickly. I was commenting on the stream that I felt like I'd gotten much better at the driving. I was very good at, I would drive on the wrong side of the road most of the time because they won't cut in front of you then, and you just have to worry about the things that are coming at you. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing that a lot. And then while I was actually saying how I was a much better driver, I was doing this mission where you have to get to this dock really quickly and take a boat. This is one where you have to shoot down a plane. And I caught the back end of my Stinger on a light pole or something like that. And it spun the car out. I went right off the edge of the highway and into the ocean. And I just started laughing. I mean, it's just so absurd. And I think if you can kind of let go, I think this is a game that you have to basically let go of caring too much about those things. And sure, try a mission a half dozen times. And if you're frustrated, just do something else. And if you're still frustrated, put it down, right? The way we play these games really is not conducive to this game. And if I had been 15 when this game came out, I would have loved to spend a lot of time with it, I think.
And I feel like there were definitely, I had moments where I felt that sort of giving over to it, feeling, and definitely enjoyed those moments. I think they just were fewer than I wanted them to be. And I think to your point, like, because it is sort of just that, do what you feel like you can do. And we talked about this in previous episodes and sort of the freedom aspect of the game. There's also I've kind of, I feel okay not finishing it in a way, because I kind of played it, I get it. And to your point, and I think it's the interesting dichotomy of this game that we've talked multiple times about, of just like, how does the story and the missions really fit in with everything else, because I can't argue that driving around the world and just having it all kind of play out around you is pretty impressive. And I do have the parts of the city that I do really know pretty well. I feel comfortable, and I feel like I'm not probably at the top of the hump, but I'm getting, as far as skill goes, I am getting better at the game. And other than the shooting, which I still don't quite get that well, other than using sniper rifles, which is usually what I default to. But so I mean, I feel it coming, and I feel like, putting some more time into it, I probably would get to that place that you have gotten to. This being my first, my first Rockstar game in any deeper way. So I'm kind of a noob when it comes to that kind of mentality anyway. Obviously I played other open world games, but if there's that, I think you hit the nail on the head. That sort of sense of indifference about the world and the simulation of it is kind of a fascinating way to put it, because it isn't something that's done very often anymore. And there's probably, a really good reason for that, but sticking to your guns and being bold with that sort of approach, there's something to be said for that too.
No, I think it's, I definitely feel like this is a game where while they were developing it, they were giggling a lot when they were playing it in the, the pit, whatever space there was that was shared, that just the weird, crazy things would happen. And they probably didn't care about the missions that much. I mean, I think the one thing the missions do is they put that time pressure on, which basically pushes you to push yourself. You're not going to spend anything. You're not going to sit there and drive slowly, and it's how you can't, right? You don't have the time. And that starts very early on. I think the fuzzball is maybe the first one already and that was 3 or 4 missions in. It may not have even been the first one. It's the first one I can remember, where the timing feels really tight. And So it forces you to drive the fastest cars as fast as you can and learn the city pretty well. And the one thing I would say about the last couple episodes where we've been on the second and third island, Staunton Island, and I forget even Shoreside Isle or whatever, or Shoreside Vale or something.
Vale, yeah.
Yeah. It's the mission density isn't quite there. You don't end up going to a lot of space on those islands as much. Certainly, especially with Shoreside, there's like 2 things on that. There's only a couple of missions. And so it's basically underused. Though I wasn't looking for there to be more. It just made it harder. There were definitely times when I'm like, I don't know how to get around because I haven't been on this island very much. Very hard to learn to make your way around.
Yeah, they haven't forced you to learn it like the other missions had.
Yeah.
Plus, the mission givers are not on that island as far as as far as I got. So
right,
you always have to go back, right, to Stoughton to get there, to get the missions, which is kind of always a little frustrating.
Except for the last one.
Okay, yeah. Oh man,
the fall missions.
Plus that drawbridge. Man,
yeah.
I was one of my runs. I'm not going to say that it was the run that I would have gotten the coffee carts and finished, but one of my runs, I felt like I was on a roll, and I'm going across that bridge, and that freaking thing raises.
Yeah,
and I go off it into the water, and I just like, really, like I have no control over that, man, just something else.
And so you had like 7 carts already?
Yeah, it was well, I might have had 6, but I probably had a couple minutes left, so because I just needed to go to that island, that last island.
Oh, there's 2 on the first island, 5 in the middle island, and then 2 more on the. Yeah,
that's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, so you had 7. Okay.
Oh, I see. Yeah. It's interesting. The map that I found online didn't have all of them on there then, but yeah. Anyway.
Oh, weird.
That's how I felt.
There's 9. Yeah. Yeah, no, I just looked at the map doing that one, and since I did have a really pretty good sense of the space at that point, I didn't really have. I think it took me 2 tries, and that was really because the first time.
Oh man, are you kidding me?
I didn't. Well, the first time I tried to push my vehicle further than it could go, but I actually had time to stop and have it pay and sprayed to repair it and continue, and still had significant amount of time left over.
Now you're just rubbing it in. Like that's
a little bit. I'm rubbing it in a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
I played it quite a few times, and I looked at a map. Yeah, but I don't have the Patriot, which apparently is
that's a big help because the Patriot that you get from finishing the Robert Loggia quest line, and this props to, I think it was Sea of Morgan who told me this on the stream. That's a huge help. Oh no, it was Mr. Heavens to Murgatroyd, actually, now that I think about it. I forgot that again tonight. He came and said, if you finish this one, you get a bulletproof vehicle you're going to want to stick in your garage and use, because you're driving around the city and everybody's shooting at you everywhere you go. Every territory that you've been in, they're after you. Yeah. So you end up going through those areas again, and they're shooting at you, and so your car's taking a ton of damage. Then that definitely would make it that much harder. So
yeah, having
the bulletproof one was very helpful. I was glad I had that pointer. So playing it on stream is helpful. I'm not going to lie. People give me a lot of suggestions, and
yeah.
I also got the idea to go through the subway tunnel to get out to the airport to get Robert Loggia's character off out of Dodge at the end of his quest line as well. And I would have never even known to look for that. So
no, yeah, you mentioned that in pre-show. I didn't even know it existed either.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's always something to be said for the sort of discovery of that stuff with open world games, right? And structure, like, once you find that, of course, this was in the age of the internet, so that stuff was going to be out there. But it's
and the subway's actually in the manual too.
Oh, is it? Okay. Didn't.
And there's a very detailed map of the whole island, and that's part of them. There's a poster, and then the other side is a detailed map. It has all these locations on it. So it's actually, there's a lot of information in the case that, of course, I had somehow forgotten to read.
Well,
but
that's good to know. Actually, I didn't know that. I got it on Steam, so that
Right.
actually would have changed things quite a bit for me. I mean, I definitely looked at maps online to look and see where tunnel entrances and stuff were. So I guess, that relativity. We were kind of complaining earlier. I'm sure somebody listening was yelling at their device, but we were complaining earlier about not having an overall map. But I guess technically they did, because it was
it was on
the physical map. So that's
Yeah.
at least something. So I'll give them that. You could refer to it as you're playing, and kind of in that transitional phase of kind of old school, include something in the something physical that is critical to the game, but that is not done anymore. So yeah, this is still an era of that. So it's interesting. Yeah, that makes me feel a little better about that choice. But yeah, I don't know. I had I mentioned one of the topics in pre-show that I wanted to talk about. There definitely were a couple moments, and I'm kind of looking through my notes. I can't remember which mission it was specifically. There were a couple missions where I don't think it was timed per se, but there was this sense, there was a couple missions you do where you have to go to kind of attack the cartel at certain places. One, you have to go save this one informant for the Kyle MacLachlan character. And then anyway, there's one at the airport, I think. But there was this sort of like, I got into this rhythm of replaying missions with a little bit of tactics and kind of approach, and kind of perfecting the way to do them. And it kind of started feeling like this heist mentality, which I understand they're sort of officially heists in the more modern games, where you kind of get this sense of planning it out, and going and getting armored up, and then going and getting the particular vehicle that you want, and kind of like, you know what I mean? Like in heist movies, when you see them setting everything up, right? And like
right.
most of the movie is just the preparation, and then the execution is like the last quarter of the movie. And, I think at the time, none of these, or most of these, weren't timed, so there wasn't that extra pressure. So I felt free to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, even if I would die during the mission and have to play it again. But that sort of sense of the criminal fantasy fulfillment of that, there were definitely some cool moments there, and I can see how that was sort of the underpinning of a lot of what they were doing, as well as what it seems like they must continue in the future with the GTA games, at least.
Yeah, I mean, there's that loop of that we talked about it before, of sort of your preparation loop, and I think that because I was not actually ever loading my save, I had forgotten you could actually just load a save anytime, and I didn't do that basically until the coffee cart one, because I had that special vehicle that now I wanted to keep, so I just would reload. And but even then, I had this loop of like, okay, I got to make sure I go ahead and run out and I take my car out and I go and I get some armor. I go buy armor at the ammunition, and whatever. I had these handful of things that I would do, and I tried to find all the blue dots so that I would know where they were, so that they'd at least be on my radar as I came through. And then I'd fail, and I mean, I only did that one a couple times, so it wasn't super bad. But doing the one after that, I think, is the boat, is the plane that flies in that you have to shoot out of the sky and like pick up all this contraband.
I did that one.
You did that one?
You don't have to shoot it at.
No. That's a different
one. That was dropped.
Not the one that's in the hangar. There's one where you have to actually shoot it out of the air, and then you're in a boat, and you have to fire a missile from the boat.
Oh, wow.
Although you could do it other ways, but that's the way I was doing it. I did that one so many times that I finally shot the thing out of the sky. I mean, sometimes I would just miss. I would just miss because the rockets aren't super fast, and it's a timing thing. So I was getting better at shooting the thing out of the sky, and then I'd have 4 stars of police presence. So I used the cheat there to remove the police presence. because I had done it. That was the one that I did a dozen times and was finally like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to get past this at this rate. I won't be able to finish this before the cast. And people were like, we don't blame you. It's fine. Go ahead. Because they saw me, they watched me on stream fail a dozen. I'm sure they're all like, we want to see something different. But even in that one, I had moments that were just moments that felt like moments of grace, where I would get, I was trying to get that stinger there as fast as I could. And because I didn't know how far out I had to go with the boat and things like that. One time I went and stole a different boat, but that's no good. You can't do that, turns out, because you run up against a wall that doesn't let you go around the island. The water is actually limited in the game. So I couldn't just like drive all the way around to where I wanted to be. But yeah, I had moments where I'd just like dive off this cliff, and then I would land, and I'd be like counter steering to not go slipping off the edge of the docks that I was effectively falling 2 or 3 stories to land on. And there would just be moments where it just was perfect that I just felt like, oh man, I totally pulled that off. And the car was a wreck, but I still made it to the boat in time. And moments like that are, can be really thrilling. And I think they are sort of high points for the game. When you're like, oh man, I can't believe I pulled that off. I mean, I think, what I was going to say earlier is I think sometimes the frustration leads to those extreme senses of fiero, was that a Homo ludens term, I think, maybe, or, but the fiero is like the I did it, moment.
We've talked about it before, I think.
Yeah, I think that's come up before. Huizinga, I think, is fiero, and the other 3. I think there's 3 others. Not up on my Huizinga. Anyway, there's that just moment of, oh man, I can't believe I just did that. Even if it's not the end of a mission, even if it's just, oh, I was trying to do this thing and this wacky thing happened and I managed to survive it, can even be a moment of that sort of fiero.
Yeah. I mean, it's this for me. And I'm sure for everybody, this is a game of high highs and low lows. And I feel like, it's sort of like, what ratio of that did you get? and what ratio are you up for, and how can you get the high ratio up more and more? But yeah, the sort of, happy accidental side of the game, definitely I've had a lot of those. There was the assassination of Kenji mission. You have to drive to the top of that parking garage.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the first time I went up there, I didn't understand the logic of like when they would see you, or when they would identify you as not the cartel. And so I think I got out of the car because it was flaming too early, so they spotted me. So I had to do it a second time. But the first time I went up there, I saw that there was that ramp up there, and so after I took him out, by just staying in the car, I, did a Yui, and then, saw the confirmation that he had been killed, and they're all shooting at me, and I, gunned it, and then, went off that ramp at the top of the parking garage, which also triggers one of the tricks, which I didn't even know they had that system. The stunts. And so the camera, so they're all shooting at me. I'm driving full speed at that ramp as I just, finished, but it's not mission success yet, because you have to get away and gun it off that ramp. And then you get that nice camera shot from the ground as it's tracking the car in slow motion. Right. Yeah. As I'm flying just forever, because it's slow motion. And then this one pedestrian just kind of walks through the frame perfectly as the car is flying over his head. And it was a movie moment, and it felt like an action movie. But I just wish I had more of those.
Have more of that. Yeah.
And again, some of it's the way that we play, and, and the way that I'm pushing and the amount of time that I have and stuff. So it's not completely the game's fault in that regard, because I do wish I could just give over to it, and just sit back and, and when I do play open world games that are this big, I do enjoy the games more when I do that. But it's a challenge for the podcast.
Yeah, for
And
sure. I mean, this is not a game that you. This is a right. I mean, we had a letter that was basically this is the game that I put in just to chill with. And
I
that's
get that.
it's not my game for that, but I definitely I've had those games, and so I certainly understand that feeling and how it can be just a warm bath to just sit in there, and even to do the crazy stuff is also fine. Tonight I actually hopped on the stream and tried to do some of the side content a little bit, just out of curiosity. I did a couple vigilante missions as the police car. Those are very difficult. You have to chase a criminal, basically. You have to chase you through the world, and they drive they're very difficult to catch up with, and you can't just sort of run them off the road and etc. So you can do that for money. You can, although you don't get a lot of money. The other one I spent a little time on, I went and got the Dodo, which is the plane that's in that hangar that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I was fooling around with it, but
just to see if how far I could fly. And apparently you can fly it to the city, but it's difficult. That was not something
I never got it off the ground, though. I didn't realize it.
I had a 7-second flight. That was my maximum.
Okay. That's funny. Yeah.
And I did some fire engine stuff. I had 3 successes in a row, and then I made a wrong turn, and I was trying to get some speed and ended up spinning out and going into the water. And that was the end of the fire engine ride and the end of the stream, the end of the GTA stuff on the stream anyway. So,
yeah. It's the happy accidents of the simulation can definitely, like you said, be amazing, because it's just that just perfect moment. Everything kind of worked out. But there are just so many times when it was the opposite, where the same systems and the same simulation, so I don't know. It's just interesting trying to get into the designers' heads, just interesting to me to pit those two things not against the player. I guess I'm gonna accept your description of it being indifferent. So at least it's not sort of actively, because I think that's probably appropriately said. It's not actively fighting the player, but even though it feels like that sometimes, but still, I think I hope that over time they found ways to marry those things better and better over time, because they probably didn't know exactly what they had at the time, and what the right versions of stuff, or the better versions, not necessarily right, but because I don't know. I mean,
I think about it as a technical. Oh yeah, they had problems getting people to play these games. I had sort of a technical thought about that. It's just, how much are you gonna develop? Right? There's just developing these systems and tuning them to be what they are, just driving around, is already a lot of work for a team that's not enormous, right? And so to have sort of even more sort of layering on top of that to make the missions go more smoothly, feels like a lot. I mean, there's definitely some improvements I would have loved to see, particularly trying to shoot down that plane. It was like, sometimes I just could not. I wanted just a timer. I just wanted the red lock on that thing I just wanted to point it at the thing and be able to shoot it and make sure it was going to be shot down. Like, to miss it was just, after I did all this work to get out there, so it was very frustrating to miss several times. But
I think it depends.
But for the most part, I just what would I do? I wouldn't want to clear the streets. I mean, so you have to find ways to do that, or I suppose you could increase the time, and then you would not have to develop anything separate. But
there's I mean, I don't necessarily want to problem solve it here, but I mean, there's examples in modern games where they you get better scores for getting better times, right? But you don't fail. So it's like there's scalability to it. It's just very binary and digital, the way that they've set it up, And I guess the other thing that, and again, not to bring it necessarily back to Red Dead, but I hear some of the commentary in that even today, with it having just released, they're just we've talked about a few times, it's just how much do they want you to enjoy and see their story? Because it feels like that's a big commitment for them, that they do have fun with that, and they want to kind of tell that crime story, and but to your point, like, the game sold well. A lot of people bought it, and they didn't have any trouble with people playing it. But if you I bet you if you see the statistics of people who finish the story, I bet it isn't high at all.
Yeah, no, that's probably true.
And so, yeah, I mean, but again, if that's fine. If it's just really it's more about just the chaos engine of it all, and for people to play that, then that's completely good answer. And that's fine. I just feel like they tend to focus a lot on their story and their characters as being a big push for why they're making the game,
Yeah.
And so when those two things are sort of pitted against each other, at least seemingly, it just sort of seems like an interesting friction point. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're really into it, then you'll push through. If you're really into the story and the characters and stuff. I mean, that's the other thing is I think for me, maybe I would push through harder if I cared more about what was going on and about the characters, That's always a motivator for me. And in this case, I didn't. So, yeah. And in fact, the story and the stereotypes I got angrier at as I went. So it's sort of like, okay.
Yeah, no, I think that can be very tough to kind of be into, for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, we've
covered that.
Tackled that. Yeah. No,
you'll be glad to know that the end of the game, however, has a new addition to the misogyny sweepstakes that have been going on. So,
good.
Yeah, they end on that note. So, yeah, it's definitely one of the things that has always turned me off on the game. But yeah, we're not going to dwell on that because we've definitely spent a lot of time talking about that already, and I don't think we have anything new to add.
No. I mean, the just to shift topics, I'm kind of looking through my notes really quickly on a couple of small things I wanted to mention. I think I maybe hit it in an earlier episode a little bit, but the radio station stuff is really stellar. And in fact, I actively don't change the radio station to one that I like. Every time I get in a car, they randomly pick one. Mm-hmm. And so it's been fun to just kind of see how they have curated that stuff and just see what they do with it, with everything from the ads to the music itself and the radio stations. And it just adds a lot of flavor and life to the game. And so I've always heard people talk about how cool that whole thing is. And they were really the first to really do it well, it feels like. And so that was, and their commitment to sort of essentially modern music, rather than a score or something. So that was one thing I definitely wanted to call appreciation for. The other one that I came to appreciate is really the car damage model, and the way that it's actually pretty complex for its time. The way that the model shifts and the damage, the damaged pieces, and the way that the physics, the physics stuff that happens on the car itself, with it, whether it be a hood or a swinging door or something like that. Like it's, the broken windows, all the different damaged states that the cars go through. It's pretty darn impressive when you really think about it, for all the different permutations and things. Like you said, just clipping the corner of something, it generally feels pretty motivated once you hit something, where depending on where you hit it. And so that, for its time, especially like in PlayStation 2, feels pretty impressive. I think the cars in general are quite good in most ways. And I think that's where the game shines.
Yeah, I think once I got better at the driving model, I don't want to say good because I don't know if I'm good, but I definitely had the sense. Definitely had this sense of the cars being definitely different, and as they got damaged, feeling like, oh, this is what happens to this car's driving model. I mean, I could almost see the math, because I mean, exploring a damage model is something I did for Starfighter. We ended up going much simpler, but it's something we talked about when it was originally a PC, more like TIE Fighter type game. It was a much more complicated flight model, which would have had a lot of damage stuff in it. And we ended up just going kind of a little bit more arcadey as far as that goes. But this, you definitely get that sense of how the cars progressively get beaten up, and they beat up physically, I mean, the model gets beat up, but also you get all these sort of changes in how the car handles, and those can be quite different depending on what they are. And different cars feel very different. Some of the bigger vehicles, like the tank, moves way too fast, for example. I also cheated and spawned myself in a tank to do the final mission because I wanted to get through it, and it was getting late for me. And I hadn't had the opportunity to steal a tank. So I'm not good enough at the game to get 6 stars and be able to run around and be successful. Part of the shooting down the plane problem was that you shoot down that plane, now you have 4 stars, and then helicopters come after you. If you shoot them out of the sky, now you have 6 stars. And getting back to someplace safe is basically impossible for me at that point. I was able to cheat a lot of missions by basically running to the pay and spray or whatever as soon as I got in. If I got 2 stars, I just raced and got in there. And then even if that was at the very beginning of a mission, you could still do the rest of the mission and really never have a police presence ever show up. It felt like an exploit, but I was happy to do it. So I did write some notes down just because I finally got some of those later missions. They kind of force a pretty high wanted level, and so I hadn't fooled with that very much. But I mean, talk about like the game feeling like it's actively fighting you. Once you have like a few cop cars after you, and if you slow down at all, like you're not getting out of there. And you can juke them and stuff. You get better at that too, where it's sort of like knowing, like when it comes in and you see it, it's like time to slow down and do a hard turn, and the thing will overshoot you, and then you can speed up again if you're in a kind of a quick car. It's stuff like that you actually can get better at. But then there are times where no amount of doing that is enough because there's just too many of them. And there's not enough room to maneuver. They're so nimble, and they're so fast. You know what I mean? Like they'll clip you, and they can turn on a dime. And again, it's another example of just something that's breaking my brain when it comes to, this is a game where you're playing a criminal and you want to do criminal stuff, and you're going to do a bunch of it. And then you could argue, well, yeah, you're a criminal, so you want a wanted level, and you want the cops to be looking out for you, and you want that tension. But it's like, that is a really punishing system to pit against the player doing what they actually want to do and are being asked to do. So I get it. I guess in theory, it's just kind of breaking my brain about how punishing it really is for the thing that I'm actually trying to have fun doing. And I guess, sounds like people use it as a way to acquire things and kind of just to have fun with sort of being that sort of notoriously, wanted criminal. But I didn't really leverage it that way, so I don't know how useful that really is, other than getting a tank, I guess. But I don't know. Just an interesting juxtaposition about the two things: the things that I'm doing and the things that they're trying to stop me from doing, the things that I want to do, with such a big system. But it's a fascinating game, and just very. I have a lot of inner turmoil over this series in various ways. Not just the moral stuff we've talked about, but just the gameplay stuff and the world structure stuff. But it's hard to argue its impact and just what it brought to the table that it really had not been done before. And I really hadn't fully appreciated it until playing it for the podcast, because when I really put myself back in that time and try to think about its sort of just extreme innovation for the time, it's pretty darn impressive overall of what they did with this thing, especially once you unlock all 3 islands. It's just kind of mind-blowing in a way. Yeah, no, totally agree. It's a big game. There's a lot of stuff in here, and and we should turn to takeaways now, unless you have other specific points. No, I think that's, I'm kind of skimming my notes from the past 4 weeks, and it's nothing. We've hit most everything. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the takeaways are obvious. I mean, obviously the sort of freedom of this open world is the big one. Uh, it does feel pretty epically big, and especially at the time, it really was eye opening. I mean, I remember being just kind of awed at the tech. We could barely load in starfighter levels in a timely manner. I would argue we did not load in starfighter levels in a timely manner. My fault. I'll totally catch to that. But yeah, I mean, what they're able to do here. I mean, when you go across these islands, it's like, oh, and suddenly, yeah, I mean, there's a short load time, but it's a very short load time. In fact, I think it's longer to actually load in some of the videos, basically the mission briefings. I think take as long as loading in as you go across a bridge, if not longer, which is kind of strange too. But because that's the one thing that you can't ever skip. You have to do that load and see the thing, and then you can quit out and load again. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really, it was an impressive technical feat. It feels interesting and fun to ride around that. And we have a whole host of games. I mean, basically any number of open world games today are descended from this, especially things like the Assassin's Creed series. Feel very much descended from this, and even the latest sort of Spider-Man or something like that does as well. So worth noting that this is the one that opened it up, and to do that on a PS2, yeah, I mean, just extraordinary. Hats off to him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the biggest one, the biggest impact, biggest takeaway, biggest just sea change for the industry. Yeah, for sure. The other one that I wrote down that I think is worth noting, because even though I have, my own personal opinions of it, just from a personal taste perspective, is just I kind of summarize it as its sort of commitment to style, and just it's they chose, and I didn't mention this to you in pre-show, Brett, but there's another aspect to this that I think is interesting for the time, especially based on a lot of the games we've played in this same year and around the same era. It's the sort of this commitment to sort of a dripping with style, and this sort of characterization of crime and the fantasy fulfillment of crime. As you said, there's a lot of media from television and film that have influenced this as well. But also there's the sort of the realistic setting of it too, being in a city and being, though there is the stylized characterizations of things and stylized writing and very, cinematic in some ways. There weren't a lot of games that were really, other than shooters in many cases, that were this focused on like driving around a real city or being in a real situation with pedestrians and those sort, and just sort of like having this sense of place. And I feel like to some degree that might have been refreshing for people too. We talked about 2001 was also Halo, and then we've played Metal Gear and stuff. And, I think we talked about it on Metal Gear as well, that the sense that this wasn't a high fantasy sort of setting, that there's actually it was actually a pretty grounded, though completely insane in a lot of other ways, grounded fictionalization of a setting and things like that. And so it sort of stood out because of that in an era where games were still fairly fantasy based and kind of over the top, Yeah. And though this one definitely has characterizations and stereotypes and stuff, so it's not realistic in that sense, but it is this sense of, I'm driving cars, I'm spray painting cars, I'm making deals, and just, it's not something you saw a lot of from a fantasy fulfillment standpoint. And so I think that stood out that way for people too, especially maybe the teenagers who shouldn't have been playing the game that were, this kind of sense of being that sort of, that hoodlum kind of fantasy or what have you.
Yeah.
And that, even, I watched the opening again today, and that opening even, is just dripping with style. And, it's just got this great 70s 70s feel to it that they unfortunately don't continue, I think, in as good a way as they did in the opening, but there's still that underpinning and foundation of that mentality. I think a lot of the writing is fairly good for its time as well. And of course, the voice acting that goes with that is pretty key. So I think they're just their commitment to their setting and their characters and their fantasy, I think is worth noting, because clearly it is the seed that they leverage for the rest of their games. Just obviously some different settings in some cases, but they've stayed pretty grounded and about kind of, reimagining this sort of stark reality of things, in a slightly, stylized way, but still, it makes it stands apart. Like you said, a lot of the influences, like the Spider-Mans or the Assassin's Creed, that's taking the same structure, but it's fantasy. It's fantasy
Right.
stuff or
Right.
superhero stuff. And this is just a dude who's running through the streets,
I don't want to burst your bubble or anything, but superhero stuff is fantasy stuff.
No, yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean fantasy versus,
Yeah, sure. I know. I'm just razzing you because it's what I do. And GTA 3 has made me a psychopath.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I did come to appreciate more the longer I played. We had talked sort of about the systems that push you to be a psychopath or really to transgress. But I'd also say they are in their way quite freeing over time. You start to say, well, you know what? Why should I care about whatever? I mean, the pedestrians or et cetera. Like what? There's no reason to care about that. They're just whatever. They're just digital recreations. They're not real, of course. I mean, obviously we know that in all these other games, but in a lot of games they try to steep you in that and make you feel like you're the heroism and things like that. And here it's like, no, you know what? This is kind of arcadey. We need to force you into the mindset of just getting it done. And I think all the systems kind of push in that direction, even the chaos engine. When you're doing a mission, will push you into this, I'm just going to be mercenary, basically. I'm just going to get it done. And whatever that means, I'm just going to do that. If it means I'm going to pull some old lady out of her car, I'm just going to do that because that's what I need in the moment. And to just be highly reactive and aware of where you actually are and just do whatever it takes to get the things done. I think it's not always successful. Obviously, there's a lot of missions I had to do multiple times, as you did. I think that's a pretty common experience, but that said, the way that those systems sort of expertly frustrate you to make you get to that point of just, I'm just going to do whatever it takes to, and to get better at the game as a result, is a pretty interesting design approach. And rather than sort of making it easier to do things, it just expects you to change your approach. That's that indifference that I was talking about. I think it is, to some degree, a strength that maybe goes too far. And again, because of the style in which we play this game, for time, it definitely frustrates us more than it might ordinary players. But I think it is ultimately to the game's credit that it makes you do those things. It makes you change in those ways. That's what it's trying to do. And treating it more like Pac-Man on PCP type game is another way to look at it, and that's totally fine. So,
I definitely had some moments over the last couple sessions where it kind of dawned on me that I started to not care about running over pedestrians.
Yeah,
and I definitely had some existential crises with that.
Yeah,
so it's a personal preference thing. Like if they were that intentional with, like you said, creating a Pac-Man on PCP, then I'll hand it to them. I don't want to dive down that rabbit hole again, but I think they didn't want to have an empty city, and so they put pedestrians and then didn't put consequences, and because it would have gotten in the way, so I don't know. It's just a weird one. It's kind of, it's just, once they did it, it's kind of no looking back. So at least, like you said, they fully committed to that sense. But it's just a weird. I know, as a small anecdote, there were a couple moments where I was kind of without a car for a moment, and I just started kind of running around the streets for a while just to see what that experience was, because most of the time I was in a car, and I wasn't running or on the streets with pedestrians. And I don't know if you ever tried that or really saw
occasionally
what happened, but I started just kind of bumping into every pedestrian that I'd come upon, and they have voice lines that they wrote for each of them. Various, a few per basically style, right? Each of the pedestrians are a caricature of something. And it's just very telling to see what lines they gave these pedestrians,
Yeah, I can imagine.
I don't even want to repeat the stuff that they say, but it's just, and to your point of sort of like, it's hard to say it, but almost dehumanizing the pedestrians, and making them just absurd. Once you actually bump into them and see what they say to you when they bump into you, and when you bump into them, it's clearly was their goal, Yeah. And so sort of like, yeah, they're not worried about this clearly. So anyway,
did you have a favorite moment?
Favorite moment.
We didn't talk about that. I'll give you a minute, because I do have one in mind. There's a mission where you have to stop an informant. You must have done this one. You have to stop an ambulance from transporting a witness to some building, and it's on the second island. It's on Staten Island, and it's the next to last mission, I think, for Robert Loggia's character. So I know you did it because you were able to try the last one. So you have to go and basically have to stop this thing. Well, the first time I did it, I tried to run it off the road and I couldn't, and it got away and it finished. The second time I went and I bought a rocket launcher from Phil, the guy, the war veteran. Got that. And I was like, okay, I'll just shoot it with one of these and that'll kill it and I'll just get away. Well, when I shot it, it said, oh, that was a decoy. And there was another one. So I was chasing after that and it got away. And the third time I'm like, okay, all right, I'll shoot this one down and then I'll race after the other one now that I know, and I'll go get it. But the third time it wasn't the decoy, and I shot it and it was coming at me full speed because it had seen me or something like that. And when the ambulance blew up, the dude's body, which was in a full body, like armor cast, it said, flew out of the ambulance and was in the street. And the cops were all alerted because I had now shot an ambulance with a rocket launcher. So I went and I hopped in a car. I went to the pay and spray, got the stars off of me, the wanted level, and then just went back. And the guy was just lying there on the road still in the middle of the street, and cars were stopping and pulling around him. And so I just went and stood a little bit near him, and you try to shoot him and you can't get through the armor with guns. So I'm throwing an occasional grenade at him, and it's just ticking up the damage on the guy. And it's just the silliest, most absurd. And the model is there, and it looks like a mummy, right? But with stiff arms and legs. Oh my God, it was so ridiculous that I was just, what on earth is this game even doing? And I don't know how that happened. We're like, why didn't he blow up with the ambulance? Maybe that's meant to happen. I don't know. I don't remember from last time. I didn't remember that from last time. Maybe I don't think I did all the cop stuff last time at all. So that was a surprise and was so absurd and off the wall that it left a mark. So
yeah, that's a pretty wacky combination of things there. I mean, and that's to your point, when you kind of just never know what's going to happen sometimes. You just like go about it, and the missions kind of, to some degree, chemically mix all of this stuff together to see what happens for you too, because they force you to do certain things, and it plays out differently. I mean, that was sort of the magic of this because of the freedom of the structure that you talked about already as a takeaway. There weren't a lot of games that had this much emergence happening, accidental emergence happening at the time. Just kind of just throwing all this stuff together to see what what happens. That was also, again, that chaos engine. That was also sort of a revelatory aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I had like big memorable moments. It was all sort of small stuff, like that one, like, you know, killing Kenji was one that I already mentioned.
Yeah.
And just that couldn't have been a better way to finish that mission. You know, it felt like an A team mission, you know, literally I was in a van too. So, or I mean, I was in the cartel thing, you know, so it felt like an A team vehicle, but it was like that low camera shot as I was, you know, flying over the camera, and the pedestrian that walked in front of the camera, which I left this detail out, the caricature, now that I've had my little moment about talking about their pedestrians, the pedestrian in that case was basically the construction worker from the YMCA.
Yes.
That guy, he was the one walking in front of the camera as the camera. So it was even more absurd because it was him, you know, another caricature stereotype. And the other one, that I remember kind of liking, and this was the main example I had for sort of my heist mentality, was the one that I kind of alluded to was that, unfortunately they call him the Oriental informant or something that Love calls him.
Yeah. The old man. Yeah.
The old man. Yeah. And so just getting to that warehouse section and then having to get the cartel, you know, vehicle. And I had tried all sorts of different weird tactics to get, because I wanted to use the sniper rifle, but you have to trigger certain things, and it actually kind of broke a little bit in different times because it couldn't tell when the triggers
mine
were.
Broke entirely. It got lost. His armored car or whatever got lost, and I was trying to push him to wherever he wanted to go. He was driving and grinding against walls and was super damaged. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where he's trying to go. I didn't remember. I don't think I finished the Donald Love stuff the first time either. I didn't this time either. So I pushed him, and he finally was like, oh, I guess I can path from here. And then he drove to another place where he couldn't proceed. And I was just like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this guy. And I just let him blow up, and then I took off. So
yeah,
that one ended. Yeah. You were able to end that one or finish that one?
Well, maybe we're not talking about the same one. And this was like you have to get a cartel vehicle to get inside this gate.
You mean just to get him? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just to get him. Yeah. Okay. Just the entrance of him. But getting him back, I didn't have trouble with. He just got into my car, and I. Yeah.
No. This is a later mission I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, that setup of that, like there was a moment when and this is more of a funny moment, memorable moment. I had gotten in, you know, you get the cartel vehicle, you inch it in there so the gate opens so you can get in, and then you a couple times I left it right there so the gate wouldn't close, and then I would try to snipe them from there. But one time I went in too far. I got out of the car and then walked a little bit too far out of the area, and the gate closed and my car was inside. And so everyone was alerted. I couldn't get in because my key, which was the car, was inside the fence now. So I actually had to go back and get another vehicle. But I just liked that heist kind of setup loop there, where I kind of had to plan my tactics out. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have too many kind of chaotic, weird moments like the one you described.
Yeah, I had a lot of strangeness. The more I played, the stranger the things that would happen would be. So anyway. Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break. We've got a ton of feedback, and some of it's quite long. So let's take a quick break and get back to that.
Sounds good.
Burn till I can't burn no more. Shine till there's no shine no more. Until the earth can't turn no more. Until I'm 5'9" no more. I'm the king. I'ma rhyme till I can't rhyme no more. Burn till I can't burn no more. Shine till there's no shine no more. Until the earth can't turn no more. Until I'm 5'9" no more. Y'all just real cocky on the street till I drop you on your knees. Knock you on your feet. I'm like Rocky on the reach. I reign while you hope to sustain. Dope in this game. Something you can't stop. You can only hope to contain. I can aim, so I blaze my tool. I got a name from using pocket change to pay my dues. No, I'm sharp as a shank and about as soft as you think. I'm hanging from the cross of your link. You get off of the drink. This fast learners. You only get hot.
Welcome back from the break. We've been getting a fair amount of fairly long feedback when it comes to GTA 3. But first, we actually have one from Jesse Morgan, who I now realize, and I'm just now making the connection that he's been showing up in the streams. I assume that is C of Morgan. Hello, Jesse. You have the first one from him, which is the one that is not super about GTA 3, and then we'll get to the GTA stuff.
So getting into game dev late from Jesse Morgan. Hey, Brett and Tim, love the show. I also appreciate Brett streaming the games because it allows me to get better context on the ones I've missed or haven't played. I have a general game dev question, and I hope you don't mind me derailing you for a bit of a personal rabbit hole. I'm 32 and have recently decided I would like to get into game dev. A bit about my history. I studied English and graphic design in college, and my first job was at a startup where I ended up overseeing the design department, but also doing other various tech-based tasks, including basic web development. I then moved from that into publishing, and I thought my job was going to be more design-focused, but it turned out to be more focused on print ad production and online reputation social media management role. All that to say, I had been considering a career change. I mentioned this to my girlfriend, and she said, "Why don't you learn to make games? It's all you talk about anyway." It's true. Not only have I been playing games my whole life, but I often listen to game developer interview podcasts, read about the game development, the development process, follow current trends, and watch EDC talks. I'm the guy at the party who, when discussing the latest game, wants to get into a deep dive discussion about game mechanics and systems, while other folks simply nod and say, "Yeah, it's fun." I always that's me too, Jesse. I always found that stuff fascinating, but never considered it could be something I could do professionally until she pointed it out. I don't have the traditional game development upbringing story. I've never modded. I didn't play D&D until a few years ago, although I took on the DM role basically right away. But I have been playing games since I could hold a controller. For the last few months, I've been reading game design books, doubling down on stuff I mentioned above, and taking a course on Unity. My plan is to build out a portfolio of a few small projects and go from there. I'm interested in game design, but specifically UI design, system design, and game field design. The last one is endlessly fascinating to me. I thought I would try to focus on these things in my small projects. He goes on. All that said, I have a few questions. One, the big one, am I too old to pivot into this career? I know people often change careers in their 30s, but it seems like an extra big hurdle in this industry. It seems like most started right out of college. Am I wrong? Do people hire junior designers at my age? Two, would you recommend trying to get my foot in the door in QA at this point? I don't have industry experience, but I do have 10 years of real work experience. Is that enough to focus on building a portfolio and then trying to jump right into a junior design role, or should I try to intern? Number three, would reaching out to designers for informational interviews be helpful? Are people in the industry open to talking to juniors in an informational capacity? And finally, number four, I'm not picky at this point about studio size. I just want to get my foot in the door any way I can. At what size studio do you think I would have the best shot given my circumstances? I apologize for the long mail, but I thought you might have a good perspective. Plus, I've heard you answer these types of questions before, and there might be others out there that are in a similar boat. If this is too derailing a question to answer in the air, I understand, but thanks for reading it anyway, and I would be open to any feedback you might have, even if it's short. Thanks.
So there you go. So the big one, I mean, I don't think you're too old to pivot into this career.
No, not at all.
I definitely feel like a lot of games companies do like to hire people fresh out of school. But that's mostly because they're cheap. And I don't think that that's necessarily the biggest impediment. I mean, it's really your flexibility on your wages, I think, at that point. I mean, if you're willing to work for the same amount as people right out of college, or maybe a little bit more, given that you have other experience, you might be actually in kind of a good spot. I don't know how you feel about that, Tim.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think I don't think age is a thing. It's really just I think you're already on the right path on building out a portfolio. I think that'll be because there isn't the experience yet in the specific field you want to get into, and there isn't the schooling side of it. The portfolio will be the most critical thing. So you already nailed that and know that that's the case, and to be able to speak, deeply and intelligently about that portfolio as well. Yeah, and I think I don't know, to jump to number 2, I don't know if personally I don't know if the QA thing is the way to go these days. I think it definitely can be.
I'm not sure I would recommend it for somebody who has working experience, but also specifically the sorts of experience he has. It just doesn't feel like a necessary step. I feel like if he can speak intelligently about games that he plays and how they're designed, which sounds like he tries to do at least with his buddies, that he might already be kind of on the right footing, and having a small portfolio of demos that he's tweaked and tuned and fiddled with, I think would be helpful. Or more than trying to go QA.
I feel like the QA foot in the door is not what it used to be. Just I think because of sort of the junior design, specifically junior design tends to be a lot more coming from schools these days than any place.
And the other thing too is a lot of QA is external these days.
Yeah, just the nature of
even
QA.
that much more difficult to get to move up because you're in a company that's isolated from the people who are actually doing the development.
The nature of QA has just changed a lot over the years, even though a lot of people who have been in the industry for many years started in QA. That it's just the fact that they've been in the industry many years, over that time has changed a lot.
As far as reaching out to designers, I mean, absolutely, people like to talk about what they do. I mean, I basically started my career by couching it as I'd like to pick your brain, and that turned into interviews. And 21 years later, here I am. I think people are generally pretty open to talking to people about what they do and what their work's like and things like that. I had great advice, which was to find somebody in a company that I admired who was doing the sort of work I'd like to do someday. And I reached out to a person like that. So I don't know about you.
No, it's the same thing for me too. I think there are quite a few developers in general who would be open to talk informally. So you just have to find the ones that, I mean, I do it all the time. For anybody who has any types of experiences, if I have the time, I definitely think it's good to get the industry to be bigger and broader and have, more perspectives added in. And so I try not to be, specific about how people get in. They can come from any field, really. There's possibilities, but I think those informationals are a great way to go. So you just got to find someone, find some groups of developers that are nearby maybe, and just kind of, there'll probably be some of them that won't be interested in talking, but you'll most likely hit some that will. And I think I think
most people in games will happily join you for lunch or a beer or something if it's on you. So
oh, totally, yeah. And I think they are probably going to be invaluable when it comes to just stuff you'll get from them. So I think it's and that's kind of that's something you probably want to do for any job, really, but any career, but definitely should help for something like this, especially with your just how passionate you seem to be about it, So yeah. I think they'll pick up on that, and they'll want to talk, and then you'll want to talk, and then it'll kind of just become a virtuous cycle at that point. So,
and then as far as studio size, I mean, I have two thoughts about that. One is a small company might need somebody who could wear additional hats, like also doing their website or whatever, if you have experience in that vein. So if they were looking for somebody to shore up their principal designer or a very small design team, but could also maybe get somebody who could do some other things, that's really with a small team. What you're looking for is people who can wear many hats. With larger teams, there tend to be just specific roles, and I'm not sure I could pick one or the other as far as a best shot for myself.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know if there's a perfect answer here. I really, you're just Brett kind of mentioned it earlier, because of your approach, you're going to want to be open to coming in, you already mentioned it, as a junior, and being humble about that and being okay with it, even though you're in your 30s or whatever. And the advantage to small studios is, like Britt said, they'll need multiple hats, but also they're probably some of them may be open to, taking a chance on people too, because they're kind of probably, taking some chances themselves, and they're kind of trying something different. And if it's like an indie studio or something, the bigger studios, unfortunately often are looking for people who have shipped games before, more than probably they should. And so that might be a little bit harder.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the budgets are higher and the risks are different and stuff. So, but I think if you're willing to come in kind of from the ground floor, that's still a possibility too. It's just hitting the timing and getting to know some of the people there maybe. So,
yeah. And then I guess one other thing I would mention, which we've talked about before, and there's a good opportunity for this coming up. The Global Game Jam is in January every year.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
If you're in a big
any game jam.
Yeah, any game jam, but the Global Game Jam was what I thought of because I know it's coming up soon. But if you can find a game jam near you, I don't know where you are, obviously, but it might be worth taking a look and seeing if there's a Global Game Jam, which I think is just globalgamejam.org or something like that, site near you. If you're able to bring some unity, futzing around to the table, that won't hurt either. So you could maybe get in there. There's often sites at universities and things, universities and colleges, because often students participate.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think the key there, that's a good point, because I'm assuming based on your description of sort of your approach with your portfolio stuff, is that you're kind of largely doing stuff on your own, but anything, and that may not be the case, so pardon the assumption, but when you are talking, especially in the design discipline, when you are talking to people, anything you can show them that also included collaboration, working with other disciplines and other people, will be beneficial. It's great to have that sort of solo designer mentality and to know your design deeply and to be able to talk intelligently about it. But games are made by teams largely, and even if it's a small team, and if you have experience, it sounds like in your other parts of your careers you've already done a lot of this. But working on in game jams, it's often there are teams looking for people to join up with, or need a hole, as Brett said, to fill. And so you're kind of learning the dynamic of working with teams as well is just as important as the actual design work. So getting some of that experience would be good too.
Cool. Thanks, Jesse. Sorry we didn't get to it last week. But I guess, you've waited this long. You're 32. You can wait another week, right? It's not the end of the world. I have one here from Miles Trust, GTA 3. Little contentious. Some of the email we've gotten has been a little contentious about our thoughts. So prepare to defend yourself, Tim. Big fan.
I don't know.
But to say GTA 3 isn't punk rock is asinine. Asinine. Punk rock isn't about fighting some vague sense of authority. It's about breaking norms and saying, I don't give a damn if you don't like it. It's about pushing boundaries. That's exactly what GTA 3 did, more so than probably any other Rockstar game. I don't really think I need to outline all the ways it did that, do I? Your response to the game over the last 3 episodes is proof enough. You say yourselves, some of the mechanics are designed to make you break the rules or become a psychopath, as you say. I mean, GTA 3 was literally described by its developers as a crime simulation game. That takes balls, especially in 2001. It dropped you in what felt like a living, breathing urban city and essentially said you were a criminal. Literally start the game in a prison jumpsuit. You steal cars, you are only loyal to yourself, and this is your playground. It was mature and violent, and it makes no apologies. It doesn't have to be your favorite game, and I understand you were probably not its target audience, considering where you were in your lives at the time it was released. And yes, the story itself is not groundbreaking, and it's not spending any time trying to justify what it is and what you can do. But you know what? That's punk rock. It certainly has flaws, but in 2001, it was an unparalleled, immersive experience that showed a generation what games could be. There's real currency in that. I just wish you guys would spend a little more time using your eye as developers talking about the game itself. What's still fun now versus what was fun then, what doesn't work and what does, why things were done the way that they were at the time. You have a unique insight and voice, but I feel like a large swath of the last 3 episodes have been spent sermonizing and a little bit virtue signaling. I'm going to get back to that one in a minute. It's almost like hearing filmmakers spend a lot of time criticizing A New Hope. Star Wars doesn't have to be your favorite thing, but you have to acknowledge its impact on film culture and what a technical achievement it was. I don't know. Maybe it's dumb of me to write an email about what I want your podcast to be. Sorry about the rant, but GTA 3 changed everything for me and many others, I imagine. Still a fan and a listener. Well, you were the one calling it not punk rock, so I'm just going to let you go with that. And then I will come back to the virtue signaling, which is something I definitely want to talk a bit about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I have the energy, to be honest. But you know, and I'm also not an expert on punk rock, so using it as flippantly as I did maybe wasn't fair. But I do feel like I guess my only rebuttal will be kind of generally toward my very, very, very limited understanding of punk rock. And I don't even know if I want to get stuck on the term punk rock as much, is that there's still punk rock or sort of an artist or somebody who's trying to make a point and to trying to buck the norm or do something different. And it's not as the reader or the listener said, you know, it's not necessarily about bucking authority or what have you specifically. Just doing something against the norm. That's fine. But I guess the ones that I feel like I'm most impressed with are the ones that are doing that with some purpose. And I think the thing that I got more from GTA, especially playing as much as I did this time, is that there really, other than the chaos engine of it all, there really wasn't much purpose. You know, there wasn't much being said. And yeah, I guess structurally we talked about it. I mean, the structure and the systems and the simulation of it, definitely impressive. But I don't feel like they were doing it with intent as much as people give them credit for. And I think punk rock for me is people doing it with intent. And I guess in definition land, the person's right that you could redefine it, or you could break the definition down as having successfully done a punk rock thing. But I guess I want to make sure that I give people the credit for doing that very intentionally. And yeah, they said that they made a crime simulation, but I don't know if that's really that impressive of a goal. They made a cool, interesting game from that, but the crime simulation part of it doesn't seem like the point when it comes to the innovation of it. And I agree with him. We didn't talk a lot about him or her. I forget who it was, but
he.
We didn't talk maybe enough about the gameplay. We tried to maybe in this last episode a little bit more, but definitely got stuck on it. I mean, you know, I'm just speaking my mind on the podcast because that's why we're doing it. So I'm just going to say,
and that's part of it.
Yeah.
The virtue signaling was a thing that I strongly responded to. Glad this email came in a few days ago. So one part of that is, as Roger Ebert, I think, was paraphrasing Pauline Kael, but he used to say, you know, a man walked into a movie theater and the critic was that man. And we are effectively a critical podcast. I mean, we're coming at it with a particular bent, which is that we know how games are made and we've been making them for a long time or whatever. And we're trying to pick games that are important. So we're not just kind of picking any random games from 2001 or whatever. That said, though, we still react how we react. And a term like virtue signaling tends to mean you're saying something you don't actually believe in order to sound important to other people, or to sound virtuous, I should say, to other people. Not only is that, I mean, that kind of is on you, Miles, for using the term. If that's what you think we're doing, that's you not examining, I think, yourself and how you respond to what we're saying, and just trying to say we don't mean what we say. That's what virtual signaling is effectively saying. So I'm not crazy about the term. That said, too, if we were virtue signaling, this would be the worst forum to do it. Because 99% of our audience is likely male. Certainly everybody who sends us mail is male. And those who join me on my streams are male. I mean, I don't have any way to actually know the numbers. It's not like the podcast services tell me who's male or female or of different races or what have you. But let's be honest, it's mostly of a particular people who look more like me and Tim, for that matter. So we'd be highly inefficient at our virtue signaling as well. Anyway, I hate the term. It seems dismissive to me of genuine concerns people have. We're just telling you what we feel in our genuine reactions. So if you don't like them, that's fine. I get it. And clearly you weren't crazy about this. It was a risk for us to do this game because I knew we weren't going to like it. So yeah. And in fact, I reacted more strongly against it than I had even just a few years back. So yeah, we were definitely not playing it now, we are not the target audience for sure. The technology has moved on. So the design has often moved on, et cetera. So yeah, a lot of stuff wrapped up in that, but even 17 years ago, we were already at points in our lives where I think it wasn't a great fit for us. So a risk for us to take, but we felt we couldn't avoid it forever. So anyway,
right.
Yeah, there you go.
Good thing you knew that term. I didn't know it. So
yeah, that's how little of a virtue signaler Tim is. He doesn't even know the term. I assume I gave you the one from Moss. Is that correct? I must have.
Yeah. GTA 3 maps and freewheeling from Moss. Hey, Tim and Brett. Was listening to the latest podcast, and the two of you brought up how you really had to learn the neighborhoods because the maps were pretty bad. When I first played through years ago, I found that frustrating, but I oddly enjoyed really getting to know the places. Eventually, I barely looked at the map because I just knew where to go. It felt like driving in my own neighborhood. That feeling was super enjoyable. Fast forward through the series to GTA 5, and there's a expletive GPS system just leading you everywhere, telling you exactly where to go pretty much all of the time. While a huge quality of life improvement, I really felt disconnected from that game because I didn't get that feeling of just knowing where to go. All the time, I really had to rely on the GPS and never really got the feeling of the places. It's a major point of contention for me in the newer games, aside from all the political stuff, which, yeah. Also, another point you mentioned was about how you guys were very mission-centric and less about just driving aimlessly and messing around. That was one of the major draws for me in this game initially. And you're right to point out that it was a big part of the game's appeal, at least to me and everyone I know who played it, even if that's not fitting your tastes. Thanks for the great podcast, Moss. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think I maybe mentioned a little bit this time, but as I got to know the neighborhoods better, I definitely felt there was a couple of moments of aha moments for me that I felt really good, and I really enjoy. And I generally enjoy in games when they don't, when they allow the player they treat the player with respect and allow them to overcome those and learn those sorts of things on their own, and then just allow the game to not hold your hand. That's one of the reasons why I actually enjoyed a lot of the design decisions that Breath of the Wild made in that regard, because they kind of treat the player with respect in that and not hold their hand very much. And I'm not surprised that the GPS system, which I didn't know exactly what it was for GTA 5, is having that effect on you, because I think for me, it ended up just being the amount of time I ended up spending with the game. I think if I kept playing and spent more time with it, I would get to that point that Moss got to and probably enjoy it quite a bit. Staten Island, I think I know pretty well at this point, but so I definitely agree with him on this.
There's definitely, I mean, there are definitely places I feel like, and I mentioned in the main part of the cast, that I feel like I didn't get a good handle on in Staten Island, and then especially with Shoreside Vale, had even more trouble kind of locating myself in the space. Although even by tonight, playing a little bit, just doing kind of random stuff, I had a much better sense, and went and pulled up a map and said, "Oh, okay, now I realize where the police station and the hospital are relative to where my base is, and things like that, and where the crossover on the dam is, and things like that." I got a much better sense. There were just sort of moments where I was like, well, how do I get back to the bridge from here? Which weren't normally a huge deal because I wasn't under a time pressure. It was like, oh, I just finished a mission, but now I'm trying to find my way back, and could be very lost. But for the most part, that wasn't a huge deal. I think, again, if that part of the game had more missions, it might have not been such an issue. So I think by that point in the game, though, more missions would not have improved the experience, really. It just might have made me better suited to understanding that area of the map.
Yeah, anyway. And I completely agree that us being mission-centric is kind of warping our perspective on this game as well. Yeah. I mean, again, given more time, I think I would, and I'm glad Brett got to try to do some of the extra stuff before we finished. Given more time, I can see just spending hours just driving around, seeing what happens, and not worrying about that stuff.
Trying to do player directed stuff. Like, I'm going to try to drive up my wanted level just on my own. With not with a mission structure that kind of makes it happen. I'm just going to try to. First, I'm going to crash into a police officer, or a driver, or a pedestrian, and then when they get out, I'm going to steal their car. Now I'm at 2. What can I do to get to 3? I mean, I think some of that stuff is fun to just explore. And to be fair, back in the day, that was the sorts of things that people showed when somebody was going to show you the game. It was like, oh, look at these things that I can do. And, oh, I found this crazy place where I could jump, or I stole this weird car, or et cetera, et cetera. Or I just ran down some populated area and just mowed people down, and started driving up that body count and the wanted level. So I definitely feel like that was part of the experience of being shown the game in 2001, and really wasn't part of us playing the game. And often a good indicator of what people respond to is what they will show you when they try to show you the game. So,
right. Yeah. When I realized that they have that stunt system, that of course, they didn't really advertise, or maybe they did and I missed it, or it's in the manual or something, but
no, I don't think it is really. Yeah.
I started seeing jumps all over the place that I didn't really think of as being jumps, and given more time, I think I would just try to go and, jump off of all
you make
those.
You make money from doing those. And, I did one too, not on that mission, but I did one. So.
They also, it seems like they sort of rate you based on what you did on the jump.
Yeah.
So
how many times did you spin or whatever?
Yeah. I had an awesome one.
Tony Hawk or whatever.
Sort of
thing there.
Yeah, I was in.
Did you find any hidden packages?
Yeah, I found a few.
Okay.
I think
so. There's a whole layer of that across the whole world as well, where there's 100 of these packages. Again, those are the sorts of things that I think end up being achievements in modern games, and kind of pushes you into playing those, and is one of, I think, the useful uses of achievements, but not relevant in the PS2 era. So
but I had a great semi-accidental jump off of one of those jumps. I was in an ambulance, which the ambulance driving model is very weird. It turns on a dime. Its turning model is very, very forgiving, but then it's very wobbly and top heavy.
Very top heavy. Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious to drive, but also sort of fun. And I just had this awesome flipping, twirling, landed on 2 tires, screeching for a mile on 2 tires. It felt like. And I think I got a lot of whatever points they give you for that, but it was just an awesome ambulance jump, again, right out of the A-Team kind of situation. I'm dating myself with that reference, but probably nobody listening knows what the A-Team is. But
I'm sure they all saw the movie in 2008.
Yeah, sure. I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know.
Isn't that Bradley Cooper? I feel like that was one of his
yeah, like Liam Neeson I don't know. I think
2010. Oh my God, it was directed by Joe Carnahan. I should probably see this movie. Yeah, Bradley Cooper. Okay, anyway. I have one here from Mark Garcia who sent us that fine image on Twitter.
Yeah, that amazing. Cover.
Yeah,
he's getting better and better. Good. Well done. Sure.
How much realism is too much realism in a non-simulation style game? Greetings, Brett and Tim. While listening to the last 3 sessions of your GTA 3 Game Club, I started thinking back to when I first played the game, which was during the 2001 holiday season. Of all the games that I've played, I don't know that they have immersed me in their world as quickly as GTA 3 did. Shortly after 8-Ball and I escaped from the prison transport truck, we hopped in a car and began driving to a waypoint on the map. Beyond the initial on-screen prompts that told me how to get in the car and drive it to the waypoint, I didn't really get any other information about the world. I knew from reading gaming magazines that if I ran over pedestrians or hit a cop car, I would get a wanted level. But what about traffic lights? I stopped at each and every red light I came to on the way to the waypoint without realizing that I didn't need to roleplay that deeply if I wanted to finish the first mission. At the time, it really was just an overwhelmingly close to real life experience for me. I wasn't alone in this. I took the game back to college with me, and most of my friends couldn't stop playing it. That included those who didn't normally play video games. They all commented on how there wasn't anything else like it out there, and how real, in quotes, it was. Sometimes I try and show my non-gaming friends other impressive titles that had released that year, MGS2 and Final Fantasy X, but they shrugged them off before going back to GTA. This got me thinking, what do you think is it about games that are designed to mimic, in excruciating detail, elements and aspects from the real world that can make them so appealing to new or even non-gamers? There seems to be something about games like GTA, Red Dead Redemption, and even Shenmue? I forget how you pronounce that. Shenmue?
Shenmue. Yeah, I think Shenmue.
Okay, yeah. Back when it was released, that makes some non-traditional gamers step back and say, wow, at those games, but then shrug off other technologically impressive titles that are more artistic or less grounded in mimicking reality. Still more puzzling to me is that while they find the realism of GTA impressive and inviting, many of these people would never pick up a game that had the word simulator in its title and play it. Why do you think games like GTA might speak to this specific group of people? As a developer, how would you and your team decide to temper the realism in your game's mechanics so that they are real enough to be impressive, but not so real that they would negatively impact your game from a fun or approachability perspective? Keep up the great work as always, guys. So I have some other stuff in this email that I appreciate, Mark, but we're not going to read for time. Your thoughts, sir?
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't know. I think we've talked a lot of, I think, over the course of the whole podcast, just about sort of gaming's sort of upbringing, and a lot of developers and gamers kind of coming from a sort of fantasy side of things. And so a lot of the content ended up being there. And I think I mentioned in one of my takeaways that the realistic setting was a standout thing for this game, especially at the time. And I don't know, I don't know if I have a great specific answer for why audiences, new audiences gravitate toward this, but I do think that people in general, the willing suspension of disbelief sort of factor or scale isn't high for a lot of people. And, and I think when you could have the exact same game as GTA and skinned completely differently in a fantasy realm, say Tolkien, and and people just like you said, people would shrug it off, and I think that generally that sense of wanting to see the familiar, but then being allowed to have that agency to do what you want within that familiar is very intriguing to people, and it's like that fantasy leap is hard for a lot of people. And I think unless it's something that maybe is kind of part of your maybe your upbringing or sort of your interests, it's hard to break into that. To give you an example from a different medium, my wife is not a fantasy person at all, or science fiction, but she really got into the Harry Potter books because of the writing. And so for her, it wasn't necessarily the real, like the realism is what she's always gravitating toward. But sometimes there's that thing that brings you into it So it's kind of, I guess it's not a perfect example for his question, but she just won't step over that line unless there's something that she can grab onto and kind of in a grounded way, because she doesn't really want that willing suspension of disbelief to be such a broad scale.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a random thought, but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that one of the things that does, I mean, I think that that's a good point actually about the sort of bar of being willing to suspend disbelief. And I think part of what reinforces it in this game is the grounding it in popular films that would have been popular with, probably male friends of Mark's, right? Is that, it's got Scarface in it, and it's got Godfather, and it's got all these sorts of movies, right? It's got The Mechanic. That might be too old for that peer group, but it's got these sorts of influences, and they're very clear and obvious. And I think even GTA Vice City, even more so with the Miami Vice sort of thing, was even stronger. I mean, I responded to that just jumping into me like, oh my God, everything looks like pastel Miami from the TV show, a place I've never been, right? It's just not real to me, but it looks real to me on the screen because I'm like, oh, this is what I imagine it would be like if I went to Miami. So there's that too. I think that that's the sort of choice that I think I would often try to make if I were trying to make something that was that had to sell like these games. I would try to find that sort of heightened reality that people know from film, and I'd pick the touch points of that film, right? I think you see that a lot in sports games as well, that they are made not to look like football does when you go to the stadium, for example, but what football looks like on television. It's mimicking the television experience and not the reality of football as it's played on the field or as it's even experienced in the stadium. The same with other sports, I mean, baseball or what have you. As a person who watches a lot of baseball, I recognize watching a baseball game that, oh, this is definitely different than when I go see a team play, a AAA game or whatever, and I'm not right behind the batter or what have you. So there's that too. So yeah, I mean, I think that those are the things that I would suggest. Maybe make it speaks to a certain group. I think the same is somewhat true of Red Dead, because of course then you're leaning on the Westerns or what have you. And I'm sure that there are other things that you could do to lean into that. So yeah, I mean, those are my kind of initial thoughts.
To give to his question about sort of like specific design or mechanics or features that to shift up within a realistic genre, but to kind of still make it inviting, I guess, enough for people to come in. I think there's actually a good example in GTA 3 where they mechanically and systemically clearly made very deliberate choices, and that's with the driving models of the cars. I mean, it's basically an arcade driving model. Yeah. They definitely tune different cars differently, so they're definitely harder to drive or feel more or less responsive, but they very much, even though there is a quote unquote simulation feel to this game, driving cars is very gamey and arcadey, and they did that on purpose so that it would be fun, and people could have fun exploring all of those different things. And they did a fairly really stellar job at the tuning of that stuff to have that kind of, even the placement we talked about in one of the episodes of the sort of how the ramp up of what cars you get when, though I'm a little mixed on that because the better stuff you get a little bit later, so your frustration is early. But generally, that's an arcadey feel, and so that feels like a very deliberate choice. They could have, driving cars in GTA is not simulation like a Forza or something like that.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So that was intentional way to sort of keep a realistic, setting, but still have it fun at the same time. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. That's definitely a good point, is that they lean away from being, I mean, the things that they add that are more deeply simulated, like the damage models, add to the fun because they add to the mayhem. And that's what they're trying to play into. And of course the cars drive a lot longer than a real car would after any of these crashes, right? Almost any of these crashes going the speed you're going.
It's forgiving.
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty forgiving. And so they break down and you're getting to play sort of a push your luck game at the same time. So, so there's that too. All right. I realized that I did not send you the next one, so I guess I'll do 2 in a row, and this will be the last one for the night. It's getting long. It is just titled GTA 3 from Chris, if that's your real name. Hi, guys. I've been enjoying your current series on Grand Theft Auto 3. I tend to say that GTA 3 is my single favorite video game, so I thought I would take this opportunity to write in with some musings. I think I own 5 copies of the game across various platforms and have completed it at least that many times over the years. After listening to some of the discussion on the podcast, particularly Tim's views on the game, I've been thinking about why I hold this game in such high regard. I originally played the game the year it was released, and I can't understand how completely mind-blowing... I can't understate, rather, I'm sorry, how completely mind-blowing this game was at the time. Excuse me. I'd exclusively played games on console up to that point, and I'd simply never experienced anything like it before. To this day, I still haven't experienced anything quite like playing GTA 3 for the first time. Listening to Tim clash with some of the particulars of the game has made me wonder, did I have those same problems at the time? Did I find those things equally as frustrating, or are my feelings for this game skewed by the fact I'd simply never played anything like it before? The truth is, I can't quite remember. I can't remember if I knew back then that taxis and Mafia Sentinels are 2 of the best all-around cars in the game, and in plentiful supply on the first island. Or that one of the best cars in the game spawns in the showroom near 8 Balls. I can't remember if I knew to climb to the roof of the building across the street and snipe Salvatore with ease as he strolls to his car using the sniper rifle you're given in the previous mission. In all likelihood, I did have the same struggles and frustrations that Tim is having, but I suppose our different viewpoints just reflect the nature of looking at something in retrospect with and without that original experience to contrast with. 2 points were raised on the most recent episode. 1, the difficulty of learning the map, and 2, mainlining the game, i.e. sticking to the critical path and ignoring side content. For me, those 2 things go hand in hand. Vigilante missions in particular are some of the most fun content in the game, and through doing this activity, you very quickly get a feel for the map and how to get from point A to B quickly. That said, relying on side content to teach the player how to navigate the map isn't ideal. Neither does the game do a particularly great job of making you aware of how much fun some of the side activities can be. I remember as a kid putting the physical version of the map that came with the game up on my bedroom wall. Interestingly, Rockstar continued to include these physical maps with all their games, although I no longer put them up on my wall. An amusing side note, I somehow managed to badly scratch the disc on my original PS2 copy of the game. The game still played fine, except for any time it tried to load Chatterbox FM, at which point the game would instantly crash. This was particularly annoying, as it was my favorite radio station. I figured out that taxis never have Chatterbox playing when you jump in them, so spent the second half of the game only stealing taxis and nothing else. In the heat of a mission, however, when you desperately need a car and a timer is ticking down, I'd often be faced with the life or death scenario of fail the mission or risk stealing a car that might be playing Chatterbox. If you think it's frustrating to have to restart missions after dying, try going back 5 or 6 missions just because you jumped in a car that happened to be playing the wrong radio station. Love the podcast. Thanks for the great episodes as always, Chris in Newcastle, UK. So nothing to specifically respond to here, but
that's great.
There's some great stuff in there. Actually, I also stopped changing the radio station after a while, and I think that's another thing where you just get tired doing something, just the way it wears you down on how you drive and things like that as well, where you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to drive on the wrong side of the road and go down the wrong way streets and all that stuff. I think it does the same thing with the radio station. That after a while, you're not going to like hit through the L1 a bunch of times and try to get to something that you particularly prefer. So you end up listening to the radio stations and realizing that some of the radio stations are actually really fun to listen to and have a lot of kind of amusing things in them. So, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I can't underscore enough how time and place for me in this game, and also the way that we play. I mean, we said it multiple times, but to his point, like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying in one of the previous episodes. I thought I kind of had mentioned how I've been trying to put myself back in that time, and it's hard for me because I was actually already at LucasArts when this game came out. So I wasn't playing it as a pure consumer even at the time, or just gamer. So it's even more complicated because I had an opinion back then too for me. But really, if I put myself in his shoes, I completely see how this is just mind blowing experience. Can't argue that enough for sure. And I just think there's sort of a perfect storm for me playing through this time for various things that are all combining to kind of create this weirdness for me. And so maybe that's not completely fair from an assessment standpoint. It's a difficult thing about the podcast in general for us, but I'm trying to be academic about it as much as I can too. It's just, one of our previous mails said this episode, kind of calling us on some of our own shenanigans when it comes to this. But, the luxury that we have with the podcast, for better or for worse, is that we're just speaking our minds and kind of going with what we feel and what's coming to us, and so we're doing this for fun. So, but I completely appreciate how this is someone's, many people's favorite game of all time, because I can see it. I can see it in there, and I can completely see why. Yeah. And that's awesome.
All right. Well, it's come to the time that I know everybody's been looking forward to. And that's where I talk about books.
I was just couldn't wait to see where this was going, and then I remember.
Going to be super brief. It's Brett's book suggestion for tie-in books to go with Grand Theft Auto 3. The first is Don Winslow. He often writes crime books, often having to do with Colombian cartels. He did, however, write a book called The Winter of Frankie Machine. A machine in gangland parlance is a hitman. And winter, of course, is the end of life. It's a great book about an aging hitman and what happens when somebody decides they don't want him around anymore. Terrific book. Really fun. You don't have to have read any other Don Winslow. A lot of his books are sort of connected in some ways. Winter of Frankie Machine really isn't all that much. So I recommend that. And then the other is actually a trilogy of books by Dan Simmons, who writes all kinds of genre fiction all over the place. He's written science fiction. He's written horror. The series I'm particularly recommending is his Joe Kurtz series, which all start with the word hard. It's a hard-boiled series. It's Hard Case, Hard Freeze, Hard as Nails. I think they're all set in Albany, New York. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong. It's definitely a wrong side of the law kind of story. It's pretty intense, and it's dark and hard-boiled, and I think really captures a lot of the sort of tone and vibe that GTA 3 has. So those are a couple things I had in mind.
Yeah, cool.
So there you go. And then finally, the thing that people actually care about, and that is what we're playing next. Sir, you want to do the honors?
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, it was took us a while to get to GTA 3 for sure, for various reasons, and it's taken us a while to get to this one too, but the timing is perfect. We're going to go after Pokemon Red and Blue from the original Game Boy, and with Pokemon Let's Go just having come out, which is a sort of remake, if you will, of Yellow and / Red and Blue sort of world structure, and just with all the Pokemon stuff going on right now, it seemed like a good timing, and especially with Pokemon Let's Go seems to be like a good entry point for a lot of people on the Switch and stuff too, as I'm reading. And so, yeah, some seem like we couldn't avoid it any longer, and so we're going to plunge into the wonderful world of Pokemon and all that comes with it. With really Red and Blue being sort of the original sort of breakout versions. So that was my memory of things.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Game Boy.
1996 originally. It's a Game Boy game. I'm going to be actually streaming it, playing a Game Boy cart that I've ordered off of Amazon. Hopefully that will actually come through and it'll be fine and I can just play it. I'm going to play it. I actually have that emulator thing you can add to the original GameCube that allows you to play Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. So I'm going to try to actually play it on that. If that doesn't work out, I'll have bought a copy and feel fine to use a ROM if I can find one. If that doesn't work out, I'm sure that'll be fine. But if it doesn't work out, I'll still be able to stream it for folks. And we're probably going to do two JRPGs in a row, so that's going to be interesting too. We are going to play for this first section up to, I believe it's called Viridian City, which is it's sort of I think the second major location that you go to. We're not going to play a ton, obviously, because we want to talk about and set it in its time, and actually maybe even talk a little bit of what it's engendered. This is one of the top selling game series of all time. Red, Green, and Blue is the second best selling Game Boy video game by sales of all time. So it did quite well. 30 million units is a lot of units. Anyway, so we will be playing that next time, and I guess that'll probably take us through the holidays and into January. We will also probably take a break and do kind of our end of year looking back kind of episode as well. So you have that to look forward to. I guess that's about all for this week, which is good because it's almost been 2 hours. You can find us on the web at Dev Game Club on Twitter, and him at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
We appreciate all the email and feedback we receive at devgameclub@gmail.com. And if you haven't, it'd be great if you could go and find your favorite podcasting service. We love to see it in the Apple Podcasts ecosystem, and give us a review. Every 5-star review helps us find new listeners, which keeps us doing this thing. So thanks so much. Thank you for joining us. And as always, good night.
Good night.